For our next segment, I want to talk about an article I saw recently, which caused me to do a deeper dive and look into two scientific academic papers that were prepared. And then I was preparing for today's show to talk about these papers, and I realized I'm all confused. So I thought we should talk this through on the show, and I'll explain to you why I'm confused, and then maybe if you want, you can look a little deeper into these papers and see if you draw the same conclusions I do, or maybe you lean a little more towards the professors that wrote them. But it sounded very exciting at the time because there's two papers, again, scientific, academic, whichever you want to call them, that essentially have tried to prove that a lot of these surveys that get conducted politically, basically political surveys that ask questions, particularly if they ask factual questions, end up with total distortions. And what these two professors did, or teams of professors rather, is they did surveys where they decided to reward people, and they did the rewarding in different ways, but a significant amount of the rewarding was economic. So in one survey, if you got a right answer, you got money, and then if you said, I don't know, you got a lesser amount of money, but you still got money, all of which was designed to take you away from giving distorted answers based upon your political views. Similarly, in the second study, they gave rewards, but they didn't do the I don't know rewards. They gave some financial rewards and then some, I don't know if I totally understand them, but on the screen, supposedly there was a series of triggers that could act as rewards. All of which was to say that if people gave opinions in surveys and they were expressing totally their political views, you'd get all the wrong answers, but when you then rewarded them somehow, then you would get the right answers. So let's take a quick look at these surveys, and let's take a quick look at some of my excerpts from the surveys, and then we're going to come back and talk about why I got confused. Okay, let's take it to the whiteboard. So one study, and these got great names, is called Partisan Bias in Factual Beliefs About Politics, and that was Bullock from the University of Texas. And the second one is You Cannot Be Serious, the Actual Incentives on Partisan Bias in Reports of Economic Perceptions, and I realized I forgot to write the author's name down. I will get that, and we'll put that in the segment at the end of the show. So it's a lot easier to do that than it is to redo the whiteboard and start all over. Anyway, I've got 4 dot point takeaways here, and they're not attributable to any one article. But one of the dot points is that surveys, again, political surveys, are low-cost opportunities to express partisan affinities. Low-cost opportunities to express partisan affinities. So in other words, you get a political survey, and why don't I just express my political opinions in the surveys even if I'm asked factual questions? Another thought was that partisans, in other words, people who are either very strongly Democratic or very strongly Republican, treat factual questions as opinions. So they may be asked a very strong factual question, but they answer it with a political opinion. And then finally, the stronger the political bond, the more exaggerated the process. So all of these are basically saying that when people are taking these surveys, they're wearing their political hats, not their factual hats, and they're kind of giving the answers they want to give based upon their political bias. And the finding, and this goes back to the second article here, is that survey conditions overstate the extent of partisan disagreement. So this finding is suggesting again that once you offer people some incentive to give the right answer, they'll tend more to give the right answer, and then they will peel away from the partisan aspect of this, and that will make sure that you understand that the survey conditions normally overstate the extent of partisan disagreement. So I know it's fairly complicated, 2 different articles, both of which were published in the Quarterly Journal of Political Science. All right, now let's talk about why I'm confused. Seems to me to be fairly significant and fairly easy to say that if you offer people an incentive to give the right answer and you take it out of a political context, you'll get the right answer. And then you leap to the finding, which basically is, so you can't take a lot of these surveys. You have to take these surveys with a grain of salt because people aren't giving the right answers. They're a Republican, they're giving the Republican answer, and if they're a Democrat, they're giving the Democratic answer. So these surveys mean nothing. And again, I was prepared to go with that. But then I started thinking about it, and I'm wondering if that's really what these surveys are telling us. Because when people take a factual scenario and move that to the political extreme and then give you the political answer, and that's where their heart is, that is an accurate measurement. That is an accurate measurement of how they're viewing the political system. And sure, they're bringing in a bias. They're not giving an intellectually correct answer, but they are giving a correct answer that's meaningful to them. So I don't know if it's correct to say that these surveys aren't accurate. It's clearly, I guess, correct to say these surveys may not be factually accurate in the answers, but these people are giving answers that they believe to be the correct answers. They're just giving it a political spin. Now, that's a sad commentary, and it does mean that when you look at the results of a survey, you kind of have to know whether or not there was significant room for that survey to give you answers that were politically biased or not. So that's where I got some confusion. And then I started thinking about my old friend, the third-party solution. The fact that we need a third party here to break the cycle of dysfunction and polarization. And clearly here we're talking about polarization. And then I started wondering, well, if people are giving distorted answers that are more emotional, but when offered an incentive, they will give more factual answers, does that mean that if we have a third political party, we could peel away respondents or thoughts or voters from the extremes and in fact move them to the middle? And in this case, we wouldn't be offering them a financial incentive, as was done in the one survey. We'd be offering them, more like a politically palatable, politically truthful answer, which is the incentive to move towards the middle. So I just came away with this different spin. I got a little confused, and maybe I want to bring it back to the third-party element here, but I'm just wondering if what these surveys are really saying is that people are locked into their political parties. And if given the opportunity, they're sticking with their political parties, and that's where they're going to be, and that's where their views are. But if you give them a reason to move off that, and that is a value-based incentive, will they in fact move off that? Now, they will in the terms of surveys. I just don't know if they will in terms of voting. But I got confused, and I wanted to share my thoughts with you. So if nothing else, you have two very interesting studies that suggest that you better pay very specific attention to how you view surveys as to whether or not they're a political slant or not. And then I want to take it back to my side, or whether or not this means that if forced to choose between only Democrats and Republicans, people are definitely going to be polarized, and they're definitely going to their side of the table. But if you give them a reason to get to the middle, will they want to get to the middle?